This is going to be this game, Kaboom. So I think I wanted to set it up. Wow, those donuts are actually bouncing off of me, which I'm not sure I want for that. Let's just have it not respond.
Did you just change the material? Did it already change?
I changed the physics mesh. Some of these things are bouncing. Oh, you know why? It's because my trigger volume is also much smaller than it needs to be. That makes sense. So this thing, remember when we had the other baby mesh, it was scaled really high. Well, this thing needs to just get fixed. Okay. So I want to make it so that you kind of have to be. So let's have a little bit of randomness in our game. Let's make it so that 10% of the time it changes directions. So I was showing this over to John earlier, where we have this behavior where we change the directions of the inside the spawner. And when the spawner collides with a trigger, it multiplies the speed by -1, which effectively changes direction. What you can do is you can collapse this to a function here, and we can reuse this functionality elsewhere. So I can type change direction here after I created this function, and I can use this here. So to start, I can just have it change direction every time it spawns. So if I just drag this into the blueprint, I can just connect it right after it spawns and right before the delay, and I can play. And what it'll do is it'll flip-flop between the two. Looks like this thing is actually slightly instant. I'm going to move that. So what I'll do now is every time it spawns one, it changes directions, which is a great starting point. And then all we have to do is put a little bit of a condition on here. Instead of changing direction every time, we can change direction only 10% of the time. We just put a branch, and I'm just going to put a branch and say, hey, when this branch is true, go ahead and change direction. Otherwise, just go straight to the delay. Take this condition. I'm going to make sure it's less than. I can do greater than. If float is greater than or equal to some other float. So if a float is greater than or equal to, say, 0.9, and I can get a random float, this random float gives me a float value from 0 to 1. So this comparison will be true only 10% of the time, because only 10% of numbers are going to be greater than 0.9. And so when that's true, it's going to actually cause it to change directions. And John, we did this with whole numbers, but it's the same idea. 30%? The thing is, like, the faster it goes, the faster it spawns, the more often it's going to change direction as well. So now I have this thing set up so that it'll change direction 10% of the time. But what I want to have is every time it spawns, I want to increase the speed a little bit. So I want to show you guys a little bit of a cleanup that we can do first. So notice here I have this wire going from the delay all the way back to the spawn actor. There is a way you can clean this up, because I don't really like crossing wires a lot. It makes things hard to read. And what I can do instead is I can just have something, I can replace this wire with essentially like a remote control button. I can create an event that connects these two without actually having to draw a wire between them, which is what I want to do. So I already have one event that says spawn an actor when the level begins. I can make a new custom event. If I just type custom event in here, I get this option to add a custom event, and I'm going to name this thing spawn object. And I'm just going to connect this straight to here. It's just an event like anything else. But now I've made the spawn object custom event. I can have this guy, instead of going all the way back over here and plugging in, I can just have this thing plug in directly into the spawn object call. And I don't even need to connect this thing back. And that's it. So when this delay calls, it'll say, hey, go ahead and call spawn object, which is almost like a remote control pushing button. It's going to fire this thing. These two are essentially connected now. Okay, the custom event and the function that calls it are now connected, which makes it easy to remove links that are going across your blueprint. So it still works, no problem. Now I want to speed it up a little bit, and actually, as another example, I'm also going to speed up the spawn rate
I was thinking that.
a little bit too. So our spawn rate is controlled right now by this, so we're going to break that out and we're going to actually control that as well. The reason why I showed you guys the custom event is because I'm also going to set up a custom event to increase the speed. So in here, at the very top, I'm going to make a new custom event that says increase speed, because I want to both increase the rate at which it spawns things and increase how fast it moves left and right. So let me show you guys something else too while we're here. If you want to organize your blueprints a little better, this is very common in Unreal, like everyone does this. You drag a box around the things you want to organize and hit C, and it'll create a comment box around it. So this is going to be a way that you can organize. So I'm going to organize this thing into a group that's called movement. I'm going to organize this whole thing into a group that's called spawning. And I'm going to organize this guy here into a group that's called wall collision. Just C. Just drag a box around it and then just hit C. The reason why I do that is so that I can see at a glance, I can just read this thing, and I can actually move all these things around easily by just moving the, by clicking on the comment box, and I can just move the whole thing around too. It's just a nice way you can like organize your scripts. All right, so I have this custom event for increasing the speed, and one of the things we want to do is, let's just say, increase the speed by a percentage. So I'm going to take this speed, and I'm going to multiply it by 0.1. I'm sorry, 1.1, which will increase it by 10% every time this thing is called. And then I'm just going to set it to that. And that's how you increase the speed by 10%. So 10% is fine. That's really fine for now. We're going to work with it a little bit better later. So as I talked about, the delay right now is 1 second. Instead, what I want to do is I want to also decrease that delay by some amount. So I'm going to right click on this guy. I'm going to promote him to a variable, and I'm going to rename that variable spawn delay. And spawn delay is going to be 1 second to start, but let's just decrease it by a little bit every time that it spawns an object. So it's going to start off at 1. Maybe I want it to be like 0.95, and then 0.9, and then all the way down to some really low value, and then we'll keep it there. So same thing like how I did with the speed. I can take the spawn delay, and I can get it into the level, and I can multiply it by a float. And if I multiply it by 0.95, that'll decrease it by 5% every time, which means it'll never quite hit 0, but it'll always get really close to 0. Okay, that's it. So I took that. It's kind of the opposite of what we did for the speed. We're increasing the speed by 10% by multiplying it by 1.1. Does it make sense why multiplying it by 1.1 increases it slowly over time? Like if you take a number like 10 and you multiply by 1.1, you get 11. And then every time I hit enter, it's multiplying by 1.1 again, right? But if I take this number and I multiply by 0.95, it'll shrink it, right? It'll never quite hit 0 either. Like it'll shrink it, but it'll kind of shrink it slower the longer it's going, right? Never quite hit 0. So that delay will go down eventually really, really fast. If I take my delay of 1 times 0.95, one iteration gives me 0.95, second iteration 0.9. This is my spawn delay. This is how many seconds it takes between spawns. Okay, let's just test it and see what that plays like. The size of the spawner increase?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't actually hook up the I didn't actually hook this thing up either. So increase speed is there, but I didn't actually connect it to here. Yeah, I need to hook it up here in between the spawn and the branch. So I'm just going to say increase speed. That's the other kind of nice part about having this thing be a custom event, is I can kind of call this thing wherever I want. So I'm going to just call it here. It's not showing up because why? Increase speed. kind of weird that that didn't show up.
Mine's not showing up. How did you get it to show up?
I just right-clicked in the blueprint and I typed in the name. That should be working. That's a bug.
It wasn't going from there,
Yeah, I tried to do it from here, and I typed increase speed, and it wasn't, or increase speed, and it didn't show up. But when I right-clicked and did increase speed, I got it.
Is that your actual variable though? I don't know.
What is this?
Yeah.
No, that you leave alone. That's who you're calling it on, and that'll always be self in this case. It does look like it's speeding up to me.
Yep. There it goes. Oh yeah.
Might be increasing speed a little bit too fast. And it's off. I did see this happening on John's machine. I was trying to figure out a nice way to solve it. This sweep is supposed to trigger overlaps along the way, and it's supposed to stop. The problem is that because we're moving so fast, it actually might be going past, like, okay, so it's actually moving from here all the way to here in one movement, right? It's going completely past it. And the thing is, it knows that it went past it, so it reverses direction, so it goes here. Then it knows it went past that, so it reverses directions again. And basically it starts doing this constantly. So what we can do, I think we need to make our trigger volumes. The problem is that to solve this, we actually have to reset its position. We'll worry about this in a second. Let's just make this thing not move so fast. I'm going to make the same point.
What if we just put a cap on the speed so that it would never move that far of a distance at once? Like if it got there, it just kept setting it back to that.
That's a good idea. We could do that. That's actually really easy to do as well. So what we can do is we can just take this thing, and let's say our speed right now is 650 on my machine, and let's say I never want to move faster than 1500. Okay? So I can drag a wire before it sets the speed. I can drag a wire from the result. So it's multiplying here by 1.1. I can take the result and I can say clamp, and clamp will let me say, hey, this number, it will never be lower than this, and it'll never be higher than this. It's equivalent in programming too. You can clamp. So I want to never be higher than 1300. Okay? So no matter what, even though it's multiplying the speed by 1.1, it'll never go higher than that, which is a nice and easy way to be able to control how high or low a number gets. Okay, play. Oh, it has to be negative 1300 too, because remember our object changes directions and the speed is negative too. So we didn't ever clamp the spawn delay though, so it'll just keep getting faster and faster no matter what. This looks kind of like a boom, right? You guys remember like the Yeah, so let's do a couple of things. One, I think we need to clamp the spawn delay as well, right?
I'm not spawning babies anymore.
Well, are you spawning donuts?
I'm not spawning anything.
Did you make sure that your did you do this custom event thing? Here, let me come over and take a look. I bet you yours not calling your custom event.
I don't know.
Yeah, so you should clamp your speeds and stuff. So. Cool. That's good. And then, yeah, you just need to drag a wire up there and type spawn object. Swan. Joy. That's it. And then if you want to increase speed in between, you see my thing to the right of the spawn actor, I have increased speed. So right click here, type increase speed. And connect that. Connect that between these two. Alright, so let's put a clamp in for the spawn delay, and let's do the kaboom behavior where it spawns. How many did it actually spawn? You gotta move the you gotta move your spawner probably.
You know, it would also have a delay, and like it would drop like 10.
And then wait.
It would wait, yeah.
And then it would go drop a bunch, right? So we can do all that too, because we have everything that we need with delays. Let me just make sure that my spawn delay is getting clamped here. So I want my spawn delay, let's say like 0.1 is the lowest it'll ever go. I think that seems like a reasonable spawn delay. And as just a test, instead of like, so one of the keys to making my career feasible is the fact that understanding when it makes sense to iterate faster. Instead of waiting for this thing to slowly go down, I'm just going to set my spawn delay to be 0.1, just by default. And this is how fast it will ever go. I'm trying to see if this is too fast or if it's not. I think that seems pretty good, right?
At the end there, it went through.
Let's see. Oh, we went through the wall. Okay, I think that's good. I think that spawn delay of 0.1 is going to work well for us. Another thing too is that notice our player is really kind of not responsive. So there's a couple ways we can do this. Let's just try tweaking the player first and see if we can get his properties to a point where we feel like he's able to move exactly where we want. What's probably going to end up happening though is that we're not going to be able to tweak him to be exactly accurate. He's still going to feel a little slow, but let's just go for it anyway. I'll just go down to his properties here, and I'm going to crank up his acceleration to be like 50,000. So his acceleration is almost immediate. His max walk speed, I think, needs to be way faster, maybe like 20,000 or 20,000. And his deceleration when he's walking needs to be like 100,000. The idea being that I want to move him. Yeah, I kind of want, so it's kind of weird right now because when I'm using my WSD, I press it once and that's how far I go. So it's really hard to get control. Let's try mapping the mouse. You know how like we did in Angry Birds where we mapped the mouse up and down movement to be with the movement of the catapult? We can go into input here and go to axis mappings. And right now move right is mapped to A and D. We can also add the mouse X to the move right mapping as well, which would mean as I move the mouse, it'll also map the scale. If you go under Edit, Project Settings, and go to Input, go under Axis Mappings and expand the Move Right drop down, and you can add Mouse X. And try just putting Mouse X in there. You'll be able to move the character left and right with the mouse. Edit, Project Settings. Input, Axis Mappings, Move Right, and then map it to Mouse X. Yep. Mouse X is left and right, while mouse Y is up and down. Okay, so he still feels a little floaty to me. I'm still going to spend a little bit of time tuning him. He feels like he doesn't accelerate fast enough, so let's make him go.
Do we have access to those variables within his script?
Yes. Yeah, so let me show you where those get hooked in, because if you open up his blueprint script, Joey, then you go to his graph. This right here, this move right, this is what gets called when you move the mouse now.
Okay.
And so this axis value is the value from -1 to 1 about how much you're moving your mouse, which gets plugged directly into his movement input.
Okay. So we could theoretically increase his speed as the spawner increases his speed?
Yes. Yeah, you can have this thing plug into a multiply that scales based on your
Whatever.
yeah. You can also set these values. He has his max acceleration. You can also get the character, movement. Oh my goodness. Get character movement, and you can say set acceleration, set max acceleration here. You can control these values explicitly through character movement here.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to tune him. 500,000 seems a little fast, maybe 100,000. I'm just trying to play around so that I can get the mouse 1-to-1 almost. Make this movement. It feels a little sensitive, but it actually might be good. It's still a little sensitive for me. Let's try making his max walk speed this far. That's better. This is me tuning it. You guys find some good values too for your own. This feels pretty good. It's fast enough where I can still feel like I can hit the end, but I can actually those values for me work pretty well. I use a 6,000 for walk speed, 100,000 for acceleration, and 100,000 for braking deceleration. It makes it so that my mouse, as I'm moving it, feels like I can get to where I need to, and anything that I miss is kind of my fault, so, which is the key bit. Did you guys get to tune it to map it to the mouse as well? The reason why the mouse is much better than W and D is just the same reason why you don't play racing games with a keyboard. Well, it's changing direction every time. You want to actually only change direction. So that
max acceleration and deceleration.
Yeah, I set the max acceleration and the deceleration to be 100,000. Christian, you can look at, you want this. That's what you want your thing to be. Yeah, and then max movement speed, max walk speed. I set that one to be 4,000.
The walk speed?
Yeah, I set that one. I set the max walk speed to be 6,000 actually. Try those values and see how they feel to you.
Whoa, man. That guy's really fast.
Go to project settings under edit. Go to the input camera at the left. Expand axis mappings. And then add a new one. So just put mouse X. That's it. Now and play it. You'll have to click into the games import once you start and then the mouse active. It's a little sensitive, but I think actually is kind of good. I don't know. Your choice. You kind of get used to it, you know? I think I want to go with it.
To set it to the mouse?
Go to the edit menu at the top and go down to project settings. Go to input on the left and then expand axis mapping. Yeah, we can increase the collision of the character as well. It might make sense to make him a little bit wider to make it so he can catch the objects a little better. If we want to do that, we can go to his components and go to his character movement component. And the little, or the capsule component, this capsule component is actually the thing that controls how wide he is. So you can make this thing wider like that. You can increase his capsule radius. Yeah, we're gonna make him float anyway. He's not actually gonna be the blue guy. So I want to fix that now because I kind of don't like the fact that he's leaving the level. We can change that. So we can clamp his rotation or his position as well, so that his position never exceeds the map. Because right now he's actually going past the boundaries here. Let's see. Let's actually, I'm worried about the time. If we have time, I'll go back and I'll fix that. Let's just set up the rest of the gameplay first. Because if you go back to the video of Kaboom, oh my god. Is there a character named Kaboom in Skylanders or something?
Probably. In what?
In Skylanders? I searched Kaboom and I came up with a bunch. Okay. I want to watch this guy stream.
23,000?
So it's a lot more than 10. I would say, let's just see what it's like. The one that he collects is 4 points, okay? So let's just watch. So it's 10 at first, so certainly more than Was that 30? I'm guessing okay, I think we're seeing a pattern, right? It's 1 point for 10 bombs at 1 point each, 20 bombs at 2 points each, 30 bombs at 3 points each, 40 bombs at 4 points each. So there are levels that you increase. So what we'll do is let's have the concept of a level. We'll start off at level 1, and level 1 will spawn 10 bombs at 1 point. Level 2 will spawn 20 bombs at 2 points each. And level 3 will spawn 30 bombs at 3 points each, so on and so forth. Okay? I guess if you die, what does it start at? Probably the same. Looks like he lost a few levels. Okay, so let's make it so that if you die, you lose half your levels, and then otherwise it'll increase the levels by 1 every time you collect all the bombs. Okay, so we'll have to add a variable that keeps track of our levels. So first, I'm going to organize this to be the speed increase section, and save it. Okay, so I'm going to add a variable that is going to be the level. And it's just going to be an integer, and it's going to start off at level 1. I'm just going to use that for later. Let's just make it, before we get to the whole level part, can I make it so that I spawn only 10 bombs and then stop? Or 10 donuts and then stop? How do I keep track of that? Let's see. I don't track anything related to how many things I've spawned already. But let's just make it so that we press play, 10 donuts spawn, and then the game finishes. Okay? We'll need to keep track of how many bombs we've spawned so far. So let's add a new variable that is number of objects spawned so far. It's kind of long, but it's going to be very clear what that variable is. We're going to use this thing. It's going to start off at 0. And all we're going to do is we're going to add 1 to this variable every time. every time an object spawns. And then what we'll do is when we hit a certain number, let's say 10, we'll just stop spawning objects altogether. So the place I'm actually spawning the objects is here. And what I can do, I'm going to put it right in between these two. I'm going to put a branch that says, hey, if I finish spawning everything I need, then stop spawning. I'm just going to inject some stuff in between these two, in between spawn falling object and increase speed. And first thing I'm going to do is add 1 to this guy here. So I take the number of objects spawned so far. I'm going to add 1 to it. Should be pretty clear. Do that. Okay, so this is just me adding 1 to the number of objects that I've spawned so far. And then I just need to put a branch in between these two. And the branch is going to say whether I should keep spawning or not. So I'll put a branch here. And if this condition is true, we're going to keep spawning.
Less than 10?
Greater than 10. If the number of objects, a number of donuts that are spawned is greater than 10, stop. Yeah, so less than 10 for in that case. If my number of objects I spawn is less than 10, keep spawning. You can kind of set it up either way. Like, depending on whether you want to use less than or greater than, it changes to whether you use true or false. So if I use less than or equal to, I'll do an integer less than or equal to. And if the number of objects I spawned so far is less than or equal to 10, go ahead and keep spawning. And this thing starts at 0. I might want that to be less than 10.
Yeah.
I think I want that to be less than 10. Okay, so if I just press play, it should only spawn 10 donuts and then stop spawning altogether. Seems like that worked to me. Okay. Now you can imagine that's just like the Kaboom. Level starts, spawns 10 things, and then stops. Except in Kaboom, it doesn't really stop. It just waits and then keeps going afterwards.
Yeah, put like a delay.
Yeah. So what we'll do, first thing I want to do is I want to just combine these things. I'll come take a look and help you in just a second, because we're almost done with this level thing. I can collapse these things into a function that says maybe spawn more. Oh, that's actually not going to work at all. That's totally wrong. Let's not collapse that into a function. Okay. Let's just make do with what we have here. We'll combine it later once we have everything set up. So I need a little bit more room here. So if it has spawned more than 10, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, this number here is not going to be 10 all the time, right? In Kaboom, it's 10 at level 1, and then 20 at level 2, and then 30 at level 3, right? So how about, instead of just always be 10, why don't we take this number, we'll just make it based on the level instead. Our level starts at level 1. What I can do is just take the level, I can multiply it by 10, and plug that into here. So now, when my level goes up, it'll let me spawn more. So let me just try here. I'm going to just take my level, and I'm going to start off at level 5, let's say. I expect it to spawn 50 things before it stops. Cool. Okay. So as long as I can increase this level, then the number of objects that are spawning are going to go up. So before we get to increasing the level at the right time, let's just have it so that when it's done, it'll wait a little bit and then go ahead and keep going. So all we need to do is put a delay, and we'll just have it wait like 2 seconds, and then just go right back to spawning, okay, for now.
Yeah.
So
What's
what's the point?
the change?
Well-
Always delay after that?
Yeah, what we'll do actually is we'll also increase the level in between these two. So the delay, well, this is the delay in between rounds, and I think this is always going to be the same. We always want to wait 2 seconds before we start it up again. But what we also want to do is we want to increase the level by 1 as well. This is kind of getting crazy, but don't worry, we'll be able to reorganize this stuff later. Just going to move this stuff out of the way for now. I'm going to take the level. I'm going to add 1 to it. And then I'm going to set it equal to the level. I'm just adding 1 to the level here. So what's happening here is if I've spawned enough objects, then I go down this route here, which is going to level me up. This is basically leveling me up 1 level. And then wait 2 seconds before I start spawning anything again. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep spawning like I do normally.
That way next time it'll be 20 and then 30.
Yep. Well, actually, the other thing we need to do, that brings up a good point, the number of objects that we spawn so far has to be reset back to 0 as well. If you think about it, when I'm spawning, this is kind of crazy, I know. If I try to organize this a little bit better. Let's just move this stuff out of the way. So first thing we're doing is we're going to add 1 to the number of objects we spawn so far every time we spawn an object. Cool. Then we see if we spawned enough objects so far. This
Delay doesn't reset it though.
Yeah, so the delay doesn't reset it, which means this thing actually needs to be reset along with the level. So all we need to do is grab this guy here. We just need to drag it in between these two. Just reset it back down to 0. So I really don't like how this thing is set up, but we're going to be able to make this into a function now. Oh, right, you can't put a function in there because it's a delay. Anytime you have a delay, you can't make it into a function, so you might want to collapse it into a macro instead. It's the same thing as a function. If you try using a function, if you can't use a function, use a macro. Increase, I'm going to call it level up. Same thing, you can double click on it. It's the same exact thing. The details of why that occurs is because functions can't handle asynchronous functions, other functions, which basically means they can't handle delays or timelines, but macros can. Okay, but macros can't have input variables, which makes it suck. Anyway, so you can see here, level up will do all of this stuff. It basically does increases my level, resets my number of objects that I spawned so far, and then waits a bit before it goes on. Okay. And then this guy here, we'll keep there for now. All right, so let's go. So it should start off at level 1, spawn 10 donuts. Wait 2 seconds, and start spawning more donuts. This should be 20 now. This should be 30. And 40. I think it's working. Oh, it went away again. We'll fix that later. Okay, so there's still a couple things that we can improve. The rate at which those things fall is due to gravity, which is kind of weird, actually, if you think about it. The bombs in Kaboom
They speed up.
They actually fall differently, right?
Yeah. I think they actually move faster.
You mean they actually fall faster?
I think so. It might just seem that way.
Yeah, so we can do the same thing too, right? So we'll have to change the rate at which those things fall, because it's kind of weird when, if I go ahead and set the spawn delay back to 0.1, and set the level.
It's not really challenging if they're really slow falling.
Yeah, I'll set the level to be 100 and set the spawn delay to be 0.1. So as if I'm at the highest level. It's like exactly the same, right? And it's not about how fast they're spawning, it's really just about how fast they're falling. So let's make it so that those things fall a little bit faster based on the level as well. So those things here, what we want to do is, we have a couple ways. We can either push them a little bit downwards so that they come out a little faster, so they have a little bit of a speed boost, or we can increase the gravity that they have so they still accelerate, but they just accelerate way faster. Because these bombs here don't actually fall with gravity. They're actually falling like at a constant rate as well. They don't actually have gravity that affects them, so maybe we can try to mimic that. And I want to say there's a way to go in here and take the static mesh, go into the physics. So these guys are locked. They're set to start awake. We might be able to change the gravity in our level to be 0 and then push them at the start. Well, let's try that. Let's go here and we're going to set up, is there a volume? Not the post-process volume. Let's try this. Let's just go into the level blueprint. See if we can turn off the level gravity. I already have something in here that when the level begins. Let's see what we can do with gravity. So I'm just going to type gravity here. It used to be in the old Unreal that you could actually set the gravity. Ah, there's a set enable gravity here. And it actually applies to components. So we can actually set that on the falling object to ignore gravity, it looks like. I'm just going to see if that property is here at all. Aha, there is an enable gravity on the physics object. It's weird that I didn't see it before. Okay, so I'm just going to uncheck this guy here. Let's just see what happens. Perfect. That's actually what we want, because what we want is we want them there, but we're going to push them downwards. So you imagine that these things are now in space. You know how in space if you push something a little bit, it'll basically fall indefinitely. What I can do is I can have the spawner spawn one of these objects and then immediately push it right after it's spawned. I'm just going to make myself have a little bit more room here. This thing that I get out is actually the falling object. I can get the static mesh from it. And I can set the linear velocity again, just like what we did for the Angry Birds demo. You know how we launched that physics ball, right? We just set the linear velocity. Well, the nice part is that all we have to do is set the linear velocity in z. Let's just make it fall maybe minus 100. See what happens when we do that. The goal is that it'll spawn it and then immediately push it downwards. I think that's working, right? What if we made this thing 300?
I think it needs to be like 1,000 or more.
Let's try 1,000.
Well, maybe 300 starting out and then increase it.
Oh, that's a little fast for the level 1. I'm trying to find a good value for level 1. Maybe.
I think 300 might be good for level 1.
Okay, let's try 300 for level 1, or maybe 500. I think 500 is good for level 1. Again, let me take my spawn delay back to 1 here. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that's just your perception. Because like the other donuts aren't like catching up to it or anything.
Well, there's no end between the
There's no end, sorry.
The rounds
there's
are
no
there.
delay between each round.
Oh well, no, because I set the level to be 100. So let me crank that back up to level 1. So let's try this. This is level 1. I think that's pretty good for level 1, right? It starts off slow. Let's take this number. I'm going to split the struct pin, so I have negative 500 here. I'm just going to take this and make it based on the level as well. So I can take the level. I can multiply it. Let's say, how fast do we want to increase by a level? Maybe 100 per level? I can multiply this thing by 100, negative 100. And I can just add this. We actually want it to be adding 100 every time. So we'll actually have to have another variable.
It's only going, you don't have to use multiply because it's only going down.
Oh yeah, you're right. I don't. That was supposed to be a plus. I'm not sure why that was a multiply. I'm gonna expose this to a variable. I'm gonna promote it to a variable. That velocity, and I'm gonna call it falling speed. I had one here, but it's not the one I want. I'm gonna call this one falling speed. And then what I want to do is every time that I level up, remember we have this level up macro thing? Every time we level up, I'm going to also increase the falling speed. I'm going to take the falling speed, and I'm going to subtract 100 from it every time. Every level.
Why subtract?
Well, because it starts off at negative 500, and I want to go to negative 600
Okay,
afterwards.
Yes, we're at negatives. That's fine.
Yeah, let's do negative 200. Let's just do negative 2,000. I just want to make sure it works when I level up once. I don't want to have to like wait, because it's going to be really subtle otherwise. I don't want it to be very subtle. I just want to prove that it works first. So this is level 1. Okay, level 2 should be much, much faster.
They're flying.
They're going negative, they're going up.
Oh. Wait, why are they going up?
They're flying.
That doesn't seem right to me.
Because you're subtracting a negative?
Oh, yeah, I shouldn't be subtracting a negative. I should be, thank you. I should be subtracting just normal. This is still level 1.
Oh shit. Whoa.
That looks more like a boom style, right?
Yeah. It's like level 10.
Well, now it's like you're catching bullets.
It's like, I'm out of here. Fuck you. I think we need to clamp this guy too. I think that'll work though. Let's increase it by 200 every time, so that by level 10 it'll give us a lot. And let's also clamp the falling speed here.
So it doesn't go over like 2,000.
Yeah, some like 2,000.
Maybe 2,000 still
Maybe 4,000 might be the highest that we want. Maybe negative 4,000 is the and we want the max to be 0. Because remember, it's always negative.
It was 4,000 last time and it flew out of the boundary.
The falling speed was, yeah. So let's just take a look here.
This is just normal level progression.
Yeah, this is normal level progression. This is the actual one.
200 plus.
I think the spawn delay is increasing way too fast.
Well, that's still going up. Classic kaboom.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna probably go on track That spawner wants to be
It does. We'll fix that. We'll fix that for sure. Yeah, so I think we need to move the spawn delay behavior instead of increasing the spawn delay or decreasing the spawn delay every time it spawns an object. I think what we want to do is increase the speed when it levels up, instead, because increasing the speed every time is kind of crazy. So I'm actually going to get rid of this increased speed in between here. This thing here is not really relevant anymore. I'm just going to move this to be inside the level up call. So I'm going to go inside level up, and I'm going to paste it here. And I'm just going to do it as part of the leveling up step. It doesn't really matter.
The speed is going back, it's starting over every time, right? Every time.
The speed, well, the problem was that the spawn delay, how fast it spawned each donut, was going up every time it spawned the donut, as opposed to in between the levels.
Oh, okay.
Because,
So
and
we just had one level originally.
yeah, so we can actually increase the speed more now. We can increase it by 50% every time, because it'll do it every time it levels up, which is a lot slower. And then we can also increase the spawn delay by that much every time too. So level 1 will be reasonable, but it'll be consistent, which is the nice part, is that for that level, the speed of the spawner and the speed of the rate at which the donuts are falling is identical. And then every level it goes up a little bit. I feel like maybe now it's going up a little too slowly, but it's hard to say. Yeah, I feel like that spawn delay may need to start off at like 0.5. Yeah.
I feel like maybe the spawner is moving, I don't know, it seems like it's moving kind of unnecessarily, like it's moving a lot, but it's not really needing to move that much.
Yeah, if you actually watch though, this guy moves whenever he's not spawning stuff either. Of course, he stops in between levels too, which we can do as well. So let's just take the speed. The spawn delay is 0.75. The speed is 650. That seems good. Maybe this thing I'll move back down to 0.25. Let's make him so he stops moving in between levels as well, because currently he's moving all the time. We can actually, while we're waiting for the speed, what we can do is, here there's the delay, and I think before the delay happens, we can just stop the movement and then start the movement again afterwards. And how do we control the movement? Well, I think the easiest thing to do is going to be add a variable that is a Boolean that says whether should move or not. And this thing will be true because we want it to always move. And what we'll just do is just have a branch here. This is our movement code, right? We can just put a branch in here. And the branch can just be whether we should move or not. Okay? And then false goes into nothing. And then inside level up here, we'll just set should move to false before the delay. And then we'll set should move to true after we're done. Like that. And this will make it so that in between levels, he'll stop moving, just like in Kaboom. Because that variable now controls whether this guy moves or not, right? And then he'll start moving again. Okay. Seems pretty good. Okay, so I think we need score, and I think we need to save our high score as well. So do you guys want to take a break now, or do you want to keep going? How are you guys feeling?
I couldn't keep up, so I'm just watching.
Okay. Do you want to take a break and then come back, and I can help you catch up over the break,
Yeah,
or?
but if I could just like see, I don't know, there's so much stuff. I just couldn't keep up with everything. There's too much going on.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that's going on.
Something's wrong with my thing and it stopped working and I couldn't fix it, so I'm kind of.
How about I give you this project, and then over break you can just load it up and you can catch up with where I am. Okay. Let me just put this up on Zool for you guys.
Because it was working and I started doing the stuff that you did, but I think that something we did differently between what we did on mine and what you did on yours, and now it's not working.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I didn't want to keep adding more stuff to it because something was wrong.
Okay. I am going to put this up on Zool. Go ahead and grab it. Let me just go here and save this project here.